back to Squawk Box this morning. The trial between Meta and the Federal Trade Commission kicking off today. At stake is the potential of a divestment of Instagram and WhatsApp from the tech giant, breaking it up effectively. Join us right now. First on CNBC is former FTC Chair Lina Khan. It is great to see you. This case, in many ways, preceded you. It was actually brought originally by the Trump administration, but then was thrown out while you were on the job, and then you refiled it.
That's right. I joined the FTC in June 2021, and within a few weeks, the judge had tossed out the case the Trump administration had filed. We fixed it, refiled it, it survived, and it's taken, 4 years to get here.
Are you surprised that this case is here? Which is to say that one of the things we've seen over the last couple of months is that Mark Zuckerberg has made a very aggressive effort to get closer to this president. He's been very supportive of this president. There had been some speculation that behind the scenes he was pushing for either some kind of settlement or for the case effectively to get withdrawn.
I'm glad to see that it's gotten to this point and that the various efforts by Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg to make the case go away on the eve of trial were not successful.
Do you believe that there's a settlement that could be reached while the case is ongoing? I mean, that's always a possibility.
I mean, that's always a possibility generally, but, once it's taken 4 years to get to trial, by that point, the parties have usually exhausted any efforts to get to settlement. Of course, with this administration, when we continue to see executives walk into the Oval Office seeking special favors, until the trial is over and until we actually get a liability verdict and then a remedy, we're all going to have to wait and see.
What do you think of the argument that this is a case that is in the rearview mirror, that this is a mistake of a case, and that the world has changed so much and has gone so far in the last decade, effectively, when so many of these deals were made, that we're now looking at TikTok as a competitor, so many other players in this universe that didn't exist even 5 years ago?
Yeah, and this is something that's going to come up as part of the case, as part of the FTC's argument that Facebook has illegally monopolized. And you have to remember that Facebook had actually done well for itself in the desktop market. But it was actually as smartphones were taking on that Facebook struggled to innovate and make that transition. And that's the moment at which it panicked. It saw companies like Instagram and WhatsApp experiencing astronomical growth. And that's the point at which it resorted to this buy or bury scheme, where if it couldn't outcompete a rival, it either bought them out or would cut them off its network. And this case is really about making sure we have free and fair competition so that innovators can succeed.
I'm not going to dissuade you from those arguments, but I'm going to suggest to you for a moment that in a world of AI, where all of a sudden OpenAI and ChatGPT, which basically didn't exist at the time, Gemini didn't exist, Anthropic, all of these things, X in its current formation, again, TikTok, these are things that weren't even on the table at the time. And so how can we look back at a deal that was made, as I said, years and years ago and suggest that they should be broken up today?
Well, look, there's no, expiration date when it comes to the illegality of a transaction. I think there is a way in which the entire social networking ecosystem looks different today because Facebook was permitted to go out and make these acquisitions, degraded its service for users, locked out other potential entrants. And now we're seeing a similar dynamic with AI, right? I mean, I think one set of lessons from Web 2.0 is that when you have these lumbering monopolists with bureaucracy and bloat, they're not the best position to innovate. And that's why we saw them engage in illegal tactics.
But what do you make of the argument that they actually, and this is now Meta today, and that you actually probably want to root for a Meta in the AI game because you have ChatGPT, you have Google, you have Anthropic. These guys are doing an open source version of it all, and that actually makes a more competitive environment.
I mean, we're going to have to keep looking closely at what's happening in AI. Obviously, the DeepSeek moment was a wake-up call for a lot of the American companies and made clear that you really do want firms to be competing to make sure we're getting the best services, but also that they have an incentive to efficiently create these products,
What do you think of the idea of national champions, though, right now? Because that's the other big piece of this debate as we're looking at tariffs. And we're looking at TikTok and whether TikTok is now going to be some kind of chess piece in a larger tariff negotiation. How do you think about that relative to a Meta? That's something that Meta would say, how is it possible that we're thinking about allowing TikTok into the United States at a time where we're also trying to effectively sue Meta out of existence?
Yeah, look, this national champions argument gets made over and over again. But in the United States, we have committed to a system of open markets and free enterprise. And that has served us extraordinarily well, right? Contributing to untold levels of innovation and growth. And the last thing we should want is to replace that system of open markets for a system that is more or less centrally planned by monopolists and a handful of gatekeepers.
I have an antitrust question for you. In a world of tariffs, if in fact we do tariff a lot of other countries, how is that going to change the antitrust dynamic? So for a long time, companies in the U.S. would say, look, we need to merge because we're competing against international giants all over, and the marketplace is large. Once you start to add tariffs into place, the sort of size and scale of the marketplace actually becomes quite limited. Does that change the dynamic?
That's right. One argument you often hear is the market is global. We're being checked by these giants globally. And you're absolutely right that if instead what we see is a much more national system where those international players are less relevant, that is definitely going to make those antitrust defenses much harder.
Right. Okay, I got to ask you about a picture of you and Steve Bannon on Twitter. What was going on with that picture?
I ran into him on my way to a conference
and he
around
likes you.
big tech.
This is very odd bedfellows.
You know, this is one of the very few areas where we've seen continued agreement between Democratic and Republican administrations, a concern about big tech platforms, big tech gatekeepers. And so, you know, there was a conference with people like Senator Cory Booker, all sorts of startup founders talking about the continued threat that big tech monopolization
Do you get along with
poses.
Steve Bannon?
You know, I don't know him very well, but ran into him at this conference.
What do you make of what's happened to antitrust, though, under this administration? So there were a lot of people in the business community that were thrilled to see you walk out the door, right? And we're hoping that under a Trump administration, there was going to be all sorts of M&A activity, lots of deals that they thought that you were blocking. That has not been the case. Has that surprised you?
Well, look, I think we've seen some good continuity in terms of the assertive posture that we had taken. But I think more deeply, it's really underscoring how you need a rule of law for businesses and for investment. And as we see these signs that instead decisions could be made based on who is getting special favors, who is getting access, that really disturbs our rule of law system and creates that uncertainty.
Have you spoken to your successor?
Yeah, I worked with Andrew while I was at the FTC. And
but have you spoken to him now?
You know, on and off, but we try to keep those conversations in confidence.
Then?
Well, he was in a minority posture, and I think at that time felt a lot of pressure to kind of dissent on some things, though there was a lot of agreement, especially when it came to the issue of taking on big monopolies. And, you know, I think switching from the role of a minority commissioner to a chair can be quite significant. So he's been kind of learning the ropes on that.
The big question I wanted to get your thoughts on is this idea of big law and what big law has now done in a number of settlements now with the Trump administration. I'm thinking of Paul Weiss, Skadden, and others that now effectively made deals with the government. What do you think of those deals? What do you think of what's happened here? It's obviously a big debate on campuses, inside law schools, in corner offices, in boardrooms about whether they should use those firms.
Well, look, it's extraordinarily disturbing and troubling to see the capitulation that we're seeing from some of the big law firms. I mean, these are some of the entities that are best positioned to withstand and fight back against some of the flagrant lawlessness that we're seeing from this administration. And I think to see them all one by one fold is just showing, you know, where their principles lie.
What do you make of the idea, though, the Trump administration is now going to use Paul Weiss to help with tariffs, for example?
I mean, it speaks for itself.
Well, let me ask you a different question. If you were a company that needed to go up against the government, meaning to go up against someone like yourself when you were in this role, would you hire a Skadden or a Paul Weiss now?
I mean, the question is, if you are seeing these law firms not even put on a fight for themselves when they are being faced with illegal actions, are you going to trust them to fight for your best interest? I think that's the real question.
And then finally, what do you make of the tariffs? And I imagine you talked to folks that were part of the former administration, but you talked to folks who were part of this administration about it?
Not very closely. I mean, I think we're all trying to keep up with the hour-by-hour changes, and I think we're seeing, some confusion about what the strategy really is, and if the goal is, in fact, to promote manufacturing and industrialization in the U.S., you have to pair tariffs with other key policies that this administration is retreating from. I would think that actually you would be someone who wants tariffs. I mean, I would think you're somebody who's wanted more competition in the country, wanted manufacturing to come back. I mean, you have also been a populist. I mean, look, I think the past administration was using tariffs quite selectively in tandem with key industrial policy goals to make sure we were actually going to be incentivizing domestic investment in key areas and key strategies. I think the strategy we're seeing right now is totally chaotic. We're seeing kind of retaliation from China when it comes to these key minerals that is going to lead U.S. manufacturers totally exposed. What was the game plan for that? I mean, it's just totally chaotic. Okay, different question. In your new role, you're back at Columbia. President Trump has put some big efforts for federal oversight over Columbia, withdrawn money, the like. What do you make of this? I mean, I'm going to let the institution take care of, the various negotiations and conversations that they have. Well, look, as a general matter, I think it's really important for academic freedom to make sure that universities are not having to shift their policies or shift how they're pursuing their academic work. But do you think things that had gone too far at the university? Well, look, I wasn't there, so I can't speak to, what has been happening. But I think as a general matter, we need universities to be standing strong for principles of academic freedom. I mean, I'd heard a lot of concern from conservatives about wokeness and this idea that we were seeing censorship and too much curbing of free speech. And now, instead, we're seeing the exact opposite. So I think there's a real question. I'm not talking about the free speech. Were you not troubled by the violence? Well, look, I think there's been, a lot of upheaval on university campuses, and various universities have really struggled to, manage that. Lina Khan, thank you for coming in this morning. Appreciate Thanks for having me. It's a fascinating time. We hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you. Kelly, back to you.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. Still to come, gamers starting to feel the pinch thanks to what one company calls a challenging economic environment. We'll have details after the break. And then earnings season, market volatility, and the Fed. Ed Yardeni joins us with an outlook on all of it. He's had we'll get into a lot of his thoughts lately. They're very, very good. Looking forward to Ed joining us. Squawk Box will be right back.